the speech, and what was actually quite widely covered, I thought, by folk like Alex Massey and the Telegraph, and by a whole range of different folk. And she said, the fact of nationhood or Scottish identity is not the motive force for independence. Nor do I believe that independence, however desirable, is essential for the preservation of our distinctive Scottish identity. I ask you, as you make up your minds over these next 2 years, to base your decision not on how Scottish or British you feel, but on what kind of country you want Scotland to be, and how best you think that can be achieved. And this is, for me, looking at that, it absolutely chimes with how I think Scots might be convinced to support independence. And this is a bit reflective. If you look at some of the polling around the correlation between claims of identity and attitudes towards the constitutional future, it's quite clear that this is quite a good way to go, because if you look at the sort of Moreno scale of identities, I don't know if you're all familiar with them, but they're the ones that ask you at one end whether you're Scottish, not British, more Scottish than British, equally Scottish or British, and more British than Scottish or British not Scottish. If you look at the big turning point in those polls, it's those that people who claim they feel equally Scottish and British. According to an Ipsos Mori poll in June, those that felt equally Scottish and British were opposed to independence 81% to 10%. And it strikes me that actually the thrust of Nicola's argument is to sort of de-emphasise this focus on identity and to say, well, what powers do you want? What kind of country do you want? Because we're not going to win independence on a prospectus which asks people, well, which identity do you choose? Which identity do you prefer? And I think we can see people like Ed Miliband, people in the Scottish Labour Party really pushing this sort of identity-driven Britishness as an argument to oppose independence. I don't know if that's something which has sort of struck any of you.
I think it's quite funny that for years the SNP and pro-independence people have been condemned as narrow nationalists and Braveheart, people who've watched Braveheart too many times, And now it's the pro-independence side that's making the argument that we shouldn't make our sense of identity affect our judgment. Identity is flexible. You can live in an independent Scotland, call yourself Scottish, and still call yourself British. We'll still be part of the island. We'll still have the shared history. We'll have a lot of elements of the shared culture. And now it's the anti-independence or the better together side who are really pushing identity and saying it's all about identity. You've got to choose between Britishness and Scottishness, and they're making it about this bipolar. And it's very narrow. It's narrow nationalism, I think, is at the very heart of the campaign against independence now. It's an idea that you have one identity, one national identity that's defined by the politically constituted state that you live in, and you can't have anything other than that. And I think it's an incredibly pessimistic and reductive way of looking at both the human mind and issues of national identity.
Is that fair, though? I mean, if you think about people like Colin Kidd, the historian, have written kind of books about the history of the idea of unionism, which is actually quite interesting. And one of his points is that unionism as an idea emerges in Scotland, from Scotland, as an attempt to avoid a kind of incorporating English union, if you like. It's a way of preserving Scottishness within a wider country. And actually, I think that's convincing. I think if you scratch most unionists, you'll find a nationalist. Yes, a Scottish nationalist and a British nationalist. That they kind of conceive of Scotland as having a sort of a country inside a country. And therefore the kind of terrain of conflict, if you like, is not about whether Scotland's a nation. It's about what significance that should have, if any, to what kind of constitution, what kind of state that we have.
I'm just amazed that the guy that was calling, that'd be yourself, the guy that was calling for a more civil discourse is now encouraging that we scratch unionists. That's amazing.
I think there's very obviously a strong intellectual foundation to unionism. I don't deny that at all. And I think there are a lot of people invested together who have thought about this long and hard and understand that identity is a complex thing, and yet that's not feeding through into their rhetoric and their public statement, constantly pushing this line that we won't have British music anymore. I mean, I think one of the most outrageous things, going back to culture, that Alistair Darling said in the campaign so far: British music won't be ours anymore if we become independent. And this, I think it's this idea that you have to have a political expression of all of your identities. You cannot be British if you're no longer a part of the British state. I completely disagree with it.
Does that touch on something, Kevin, you were saying earlier about the anxiety as an artist, a musician, someone producing literature, someone producing plays, about how that relates to sort of formal politics, not just to parties, but to the state, and this idea that on some curious level, that what a warbler from England produces is somehow mine, and therefore I'll be deprived of it. That strikes me that maybe touches very profoundly on that anxiety you were stating about being situated within a kind of wider conversation, a wider country, but also at the same time wanting to maybe shy away from formal political aspects in terms of artistic expression.
Yeah, as you're speaking, it reminds me of a period in the mid-90s when Britpop appeared, draped in Union Jacks, and excluded every band in Scotland in the process, and it became like this very quintessentially English pop music that was like repackaged as Britpop. Scottish bands didn't get a look in, despite having all the Proclaimers certainly weren't included in Britpop, and nor were Arab Strap or any of these, all the great bands that were kicking it. Although Arab Strap were only just beginning at that point, none of the Primal Scream weren't really included in Britpop. So you had this. I think there's an interchangeable thing between English culture and British culture in the minds of people who consider themselves part of that, who would identify with that. But for most bands and artists, national identity is not something you're going to be parading unless this is an integral part of your reason for existence, which is only a minority of bands, I would say, or musicians. I don't think, the idea of British music and it not being, I really couldn't get my head around what Alistair Darling was saying. I thought, I've never heard so much tripe, because, when you think of all the music we listen to, it tends to have its roots in black music, which nobody ever talks about. Jamaican music coming in here doesn't suddenly become British music because it's produced by Steel Pulse in Birmingham or whatever. Music is international, it's an international language, and people, I don't know anybody. I would actually take their number out of my phone if I found out that one of my friends decided that something had to be Scottish before they listened to it, or it had to be British. I would just have no contact with that person ever again.
Can I just say something on Proclaimers there that come back? Not only weren't they included in these things, but I can remember an incredible snootiness on some of on the radio programs at the time when Letter from America came out, on the radio programs, on the television programs, and they were kind of announcing it, right, this is number one, through gritted teeth. I can't believe that some people have been buying this record, but Jesus Christ, it's number one, there you go. And I can remember not so much hostility, but a kind of bemusement as to why people actually listen to this or like this.
Absolutely. I remember that too. People were sneering and impersonating their accents when that record came out. And this is the thing, the Proclaimers, they're one of my favourite bands. And one of the reasons why I love this...
It's because you're a hippie.
I wasn't going to say that at all.
I know, I like them as well, but there you go.
Obviously. But what I like about the Proclaimers is they actually understand that in a sort of what I would call a Bob Dylan kind of way of where politics fits into music, and it has a kind of natural thing. The Proclaimers, like Bob Dylan, their best songs are love songs. I think the best political artists write really good love verse when it comes to music. The Proclaimers do this. They write beautiful pop songs, beautiful love songs, and the politics just sits alongside this very, very naturally. They're not just a political band. You don't listen to a Proclaimers album and it's going to be like 12 political tracks. That just doesn't happen. And that to me is that's the essence of a really good artist who's politically motivated but in touch with everything else. So I just thought I'd mention that because the Proclaimers are always worth promoting.
Can I just come in on the speech again? Because I thought it was actually an excellent speech from Nicola Sturgeon, surprisingly so. It's not. I think she's a very able politician, but when she was saying it, I had one of those kind of, go on moments. That was really good. And the thing that actually struck me about it was, and I thought was the best thing about it, was the part about, utilitarian and existentialist strands to the independence movement. Because Scotland's a nation, that's existentialist strand. It's a no-brainer that we should be independent, or utilitarian in that it will make the country better to have independence on a utilitarian level. And the thing that is so simple. We don't have to argue one or the other. We can argue both. If you want independence to have a better chance in the referendum, then it's totally both of those things. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to be corralled into making one or other of those arguments. It can be both of those, and I thought that was the best part of the speech, just for me.
To me, the speech can easily be deconstructed, and I thought it was a fantastic speech, and I agree with the entire thrust of it, that this is about democracy, and this is about social values and the type of Scotland it could be, rather than about identity. I mean, how that deconstructs is basically all the people who are going to support independence for reasons of identity are all in the bag. Now we've got to win over the people on the quest, who are looking at it from different aspects. And that's absolutely right from a tactical, strategic point of view. This is going to be won on democracy. And I really do hope that the Better Together campaign concentrate on identity, because as we move on, it'll expose them more and more to the sheer vacuity of what's at the heart of their argument. Because so many people in Scotland will continue to be not so much British, but will continue to be English after 2014. I think is it 10% of Scotland are English and will continue. You can't base a democratic argument for independence on nationality when not everybody's consider themselves Scottish. So I think Nicola's speech hit the nail on the head, and if we keep fighting on this. Not so much fighting, but we keep patiently explaining this is about democracy, we'll win. At some point, the Better Together argument is going to have to change for their point of view, but as long as it doesn't, we should be quite happy about that and keep Alistair Darling where he is and keep all this flag waving and all the rest of the nonsense down south. Keep it coming.
Yeah, and the other thing about the speech, I mean, you kind of say this yourself, Kevin, is that it does demand a response from Better Together. I mean, I'm not sure we'll get it. I mean, the Better Together are going to have to either focus on identity as they're doing, or they're going to have to start articulating a message about social justice. And I think it's going to be very, very hard to do that over the next 2 years, as you saw in the autumn statement. Benefits are going to be cut, taxes on the rich are going down. And it's very hard to make any kind of argument that Westminster is a vessel for the promotion of social justice right now. And as Labour have to kind of, because Labour are obviously in full-on campaign mode already, and they're going to have to go out and say we're going to keep all these service cuts, we're going to keep all these benefit cuts, because that's where the UK population, or the selectorate of the UK population, the people who decide elections, that's where they are. They are kind of they buy into this rhetoric of benefit scroungers, and so it's going to be very hard for Better Together to make an argument for the union as something that can achieve social justice, and they're not going to be able to put forward any policies for this, because as it gets closer to the time, there's going to be three parties as part of Better Together who are going to be campaigning very passionately against each other, while the Yes campaign is going to be, relatively united. We've got a broadly centre-left or left coalition leading the campaign. And then there's even movements like Radical Independence who are further to the left. There's a few Conservatives, but on the whole, they appear to be willing to keep kind of quiet. And when they do speak, they're speaking to the business community in general about cutting corporation tax, things like that.
That's very. Can I just add one little comment to that? Sorry for butting in here, but it struck me there's an aspect of this campaign for 2014 has not been touched on, is that we're all going to be campaigning for a yes vote and independence, and we'll be very much united, the whole independence movement. But what's not been commented on, the fact is that the Labour Party and the Better Together campaign are going to be fighting two campaigns within 6 months of each other, and they're going to overlap, as they're going to be fighting for a no vote, but also they're going to be fighting to take power at Westminster in May 2015. And so therefore they're going to have two separate messages if they want to win Scotland. This is going to tear the Labour Party up in two, because they know they're going to have to fight from the question of social values and social justice to win Scotland. But they're also going to be trying to win an election on the basis of trying to win the south of England and the richer constituencies that they see as the necessary constituency to take power in London. So this is going to come to the fore, and you're going to see them looking Janus-like in two different directions, and I don't think they can reconcile this. And that's going to be another thing that's going to help undo their campaign as they fight among themselves for the spoils of 2015.
It's possible.
Sorry. That has to be true in another way as well. That actually it's in their Westminster political interest going up to 2015 to cry bloody murder and say that, the Tories are dismantling the NHS, they're destroying all of these things you hold dear, And as you say, they will have to finesse that in terms of communicating with the richer constituencies in the southeast of England. But on the other level, they'll be forced in this independence campaign to tell us that we're all better together. And as I have maybe said before, but one of the real hostage to fortune about their slogan is that it immediately sort of prompts the question, well, better in what way? And it's a bit in a utilitarian political